Welcome, everyone, to the 2024-2025 Perkins 5 Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Grant Application Training. This training will cover how to access the grant application, how to complete the application, and how to submit the application. That's the area of focus for today. If you have specific program questions about the grant, you'll need to reach out to the program staff. We'll have more information about how to contact them a little later in the presentation. And there are other specific reasons you might need to contact other staff members about this grant. But we're here to show you today how to access the application, how to complete it, and how to submit it. This presentation is brought to you by the Grants Administration Division. I'm going to be your presenter today, along with my colleague, Christy Mazzell-James. My name is Amy Samet. I've been with TEA almost 20 years. I started out as a negotiator, and I have been a negotiator for many years. Now I'm a negotiation supervisor, and I love the team that I work with. They are a friendly, helpful, dedicated, knowledgeable group of negotiators. If you've been with us for quite a while, you know for a fact how great they are because you've worked with them already. And if you're new to your position, welcome. We're really glad you're here. And you'll have an opportunity to meet a negotiator as you go through this process.
Amy.
Yes.
We're getting a few messages to put the QR code back up for a moment. Can you pause and put that up for just a moment?
Oh, sure.
Thank you so much.
Are we good? Okay, I'm going to go on. I believe you can also access it at the end of the presentation. Welcome to all. This presentation is intended solely to provide general information and guidance to Texas LEAs and reflects the Texas Education Agency's current understanding of the presentation topics and applicable federal guidance. The content of this presentation is subject to change as a result of further potential information and guidance provided by federal agencies with regulatory oversight of these programs. This presentation does not constitute legal advice, and LEAs are therefore advised to seek legal counsel regarding the information and guidance provided in this presentation before acting on such information and guidance. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to talk about getting ready, the SC 5003, which is the Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule, the ADC, which stands for Applicant Designation and Certification Form, applicant general information, the application program description, the application budget. We'll give you a wide variety of resources to help you in your process, and we will end with questions and presentation feedback. Let's start with getting ready. Before you ever start working on your application, be aware of important dates, update your district's information in Ask TED, verify that you have access to TEAL and to eGrants, update your eGrants contacts, have a copy of your most recently approved application available as a reference and as a resource, and coordinate with others. And in this case, it would be others who are active with the Special Education Grant and the ESSA grant, because all three grant programs need to coordinate in order to get the application submitted. Here are your important dates for Perkins 5. First of all, the CLNA was released on February 7th, 2024. It should have closed on June 12th, but not everyone had a chance to get that submitted. So the due date for that has been extended to June 28th. Submitted that by now. The Perkins 5 ADC, which is the applicant designation and certification form for LEAs, was released on May 13th. And the Perkins 5 application opened on June the 12th. And you'll see that all three of those forms are due September 3rd. Also noted here is that the 2024-2025 planning amounts for LEAs are available at the link down there for entitlements. Next is making sure your information is updated and correct in Ask TED. You can access Ask TED from the TEA homepage. It's right there across the ribbon at the top of the page, green arrow pointing to it. Ask TED is where all of your school district information is stored. So you want to be sure that you have your superintendent correct. If you're not sure whether your information is correct and you don't even know for a fact whether you have access to Ask TED, you can do the quick district lookup and you can apply for administrator login. For a time, there were people who were calling us negotiators and saying, you all need to update our district's information in Ask TED, when in fact, that is the district's action. We have three very handy videos available to you. One is how to request access to TEAL, to TEA login. This video will walk you through the process of getting TEA login for the first time. Access to TEAL will take you then to access to eGrants. If you're brand new, that's something you'll want to take care of as soon as possible. And I'll say this throughout the presentation, you want to do everything sooner rather than later. Because if you get closer to the deadline, the tension is higher, more people are waiting in line to get processes done, more people are waiting till the last minute. You want to do it when there's plenty of time to get this done. Request your access to TEAL. Now, if you think you might already have access to TEAL, for example, if you came to your current position from a different school district or you were a teacher before and now you're working at an ESC, for example, make sure that you don't apply for TEAL access twice because that can lead to many complications. Just be sure that you're clear on your access before you take the next step, which is requesting access to eGrants. And again, there's a short video that was recorded by my colleague, JJ Sanchez, and he will tell you how to get access to eGrants. You'll also want to be sure that the contacts for your district are entered. If the contacts are not updated, then all of the messages will go to the wrong person. So be sure that if you've changed email addresses or you've changed phone numbers or you got married and your name changed, that change is updated in the contacts list for your district. Also be sure that people who've left your district or retired are no longer on the contacts list. Getting the contacts list all coordinated and correct now will help you because later you'll be pulling your contact down from a drop-down menu to complete forms and everything will be ready to go. So this video was created by Lori Marcourt and she can walk you through how to get all those contacts updated. Now we are at the SC 5003, the Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule. This schedule can be found under the Special Collections tab on your grants page. And this one is top of the list, the 2024-2025 SC 5000 Formula Grants Consolidated Schedule. There are three parts to the schedule. On the first page, you will talk about the barriers that are posed to any member of any of the three grants target population. And barriers are things like high mobility rates, gender bias, gang-related activities, shortage of qualified personnel. So as a group, all of the grantees work together on compiling that barriers list. In the second part, all grant participants or people who are submitting the applications for the grants agree that they have reviewed the guidelines, the provisions, the assurances, the certifications. So you're agreeing to all of the assurances and stating that you've had a chance to review them. Finally, the third part is the certification and incorporation by the authorized official, who should be able to pull their information down from this drop-down menu. Be sure that you hit the certify and submit button. Very often, this is the thing that trips people up in trying to submit an application, is that they've saved a document, but they haven't submitted it to TEA. That's sometimes the case with the SC 5003, sometimes with the ADC, sometimes with the application. So be sure that your document is not just in draft, but it's been certified and submitted so that it has reached TEA. Now we'll discuss the ADC, the Applicant Designation and Certification Form. You will find this under the Grants tab. It won't become visible to you until the SC 5003 has been submitted. Hit Apply for Eligible Grants. This is what the top section of the ADC looks like. You have 4 different choices. You can apply on your own, which means you have at least $15,000 and you can apply for your own grant. You can apply as fiscal agent of a shared service arrangement. The ESCs mostly are fiscal agents for shared services arrangements for the Perkins grant. Also, a larger district or one district can band together with other districts and they can form a shared services arrangement, and one will apply to be the fiscal agent of that shared services arrangement. The third selection is not apply at all. And you might wonder, why do we need to tell TEA if we're not applying at all? Well, it's just like RSVPing for a party. You're letting the host know you are not going to be there. This means we're not going to continue to ask you to submit your application if you've already told us you're not applying at all. And the funds that have been dedicated to your grant may be available for other grantees. The last selection is apply as a member of a shared service arrangement. Small schools with an entitlement of less than $15,000 will need to apply as a member of a shared services arrangement. It's usually your ESC, but again, sometimes it is another district. Hopefully, all of the ESCs have submitted their ADCs for the Perkins grant by now so that member districts can choose apply as member of SSA. Another thing to note here is that the ADC designation must match the CLNA designation, and that's your comprehensive local needs assessment. So when you filled that out, you needed to indicate this as well. Make sure that whatever you designate is matching what you're putting on your ADC. The ADC and the CLNA must match. As I mentioned, if you have less than $15,000, normally you would not get your own grant, but you may submit a waiver if you have a compelling reason. If you believe you belong in that category, it's usually 3 or 4 grantees every year. Contact the negotiator for your region for this form. It must be attached with your application. You'll get more details when you reach your negotiator if you fit that description. Lastly, the application designation and certification form must be certified and submitted. In Part 2, the authorized official reviews the certification and incorporation statement, enters the authorized official information by accessing the Select Contacts drop-down menu, and selects the Certify and Submit button to send to TEA. And just one more time, we'll walk through those steps. First, complete the comprehensive local needs assessment. I feel sure most of you have done that by now. Complete the SC 5003. Then you'll go to the Grants tab to access the ADC for the Perkins grant, and then the application will open once the ADC has been submitted. Application general information. The GS 2100, which is where you put the name of the primary contact and the secondary contact for this grant, can be updated at any time during the grant period. This is something grantees don't always realize. Some people have submitted an amendment just to update the contacts. You can go into eGrants and update your contacts at any time without submitting an amendment. Next comes the application program description. Here are your experts on the Perkins program. Marcette Kilgore is a statewide CTE director. Erica Bates is a CTE coordinator who works with the career clusters, education and training, hospitality and tourism, human resources. Jennifer Bullock, also a CTE coordinator. Her career clusters are listed below. Dale Fowler, CTE coordinator for business, marketing and finance, law and public service. Lacey Freeman, CTE coordinator for arts, AV, technology and communications and health science. Les Hudson is the coordinator for agriculture, food and natural resources, architecture and construction, energy, transportation, distribution and logistics. And Steve Smith has a different set of duties. He is a project manager. He does CTE indicator auto coding, labor market analysis, and content management. And here's contact information for all the people I just mentioned. They also have region assignments, and you can ask them program questions pertaining to those regions. Next, we'll talk about the program description, the PS 3012 local application, and this is informed by the CLNA. CLNA needs to be completed every 2 years. This is one of the years that the CLNA needs to be completed. Last year, you saw a copy prior year data button, but that is disabled this year. It's not even visible this year because this is a year that you need to submit the CLNA. The program description discusses the comprehensive local needs assessment results. That's what you put in part 1. And then there are several more sections. For the comprehensive local needs assessment results, you will summarize the results of the comprehensive local needs assessment and describe how the LEA will use funds to develop and implement evaluations of CTE programs, including evaluations necessary to complete the CLNA. Please note the instructions button in the upper right-hand corner. The instructions button is your best friend because there's so much valuable information and detailed information there. If you're working on your application at 3 a.m., you wouldn't be able to reach anyone here at TEA anyway. The instructions button will have all sorts of information that will help you complete your application. More parts to the local application. Part 2, programs of study funding. Part 3, career exploration, guidance, and counseling provided to all students in the LEA. Part 4, improve academic and technical skills of CTE students. Part 5, special populations and non-traditional fields. Part 6, work-based learning opportunities. Part 7, post-secondary credit. Part 8, recruitment, retention, and training. Part 9, performance gaps. Please know that as you're working on your application, you can hit save at any point along the way, and a list of errors will appear if the application has not been completed correctly. You can work on the PS 3312 and save it and complete it at a later time. Narratives are required. Do not include a web address. For example, if you think, oh, this question will be answered by going to this website. You can't do that. Don't put links or web addresses. You must write in each field. And there's a limited number of characters that you can enter in the field. You'll be shown when you have to stop entering more words and letters. There is a difference between errors and warnings. If you have errors in your application, you will not be able to submit it. However, if you have warnings, that will not stop you from submitting the application. Sometimes the warning means that there's an issue that you'll need to give attention to as you go along through the grant process, or they might be asking you to just double check that your information is correct, but an error is the only thing that will stop you from submitting the application. In this case, you'll see the errors are listed. So sometimes hitting the save button will take you back to where you can find your errors and go back and correct them. A very handy tool. Next, we'll talk about PS 3350, the accountability schedule. For each performance measure, data is provided from 2019 to 2020, 2020-21, and 21-22. And on the right are two columns. If those columns are grayed out, you do not need to enter anything in either of those columns. If the column is white, explain why the actual percent for the 21-22 was less than the statewide target. And in the next column, describe strategies the LEA will use to improve CTE student performance. Now, this can be very brief and simple explanation. For example, if you didn't meet the target, the reason could be we had a program that wasn't very well publicized. And then describing the strategies to improve, you could say we will work harder to get information out to the target population about this program. And that would be sufficient. The next page shows what the whole form looks like. In this case, you can see that the targets were met for all of the performance measures except one. And again, if you see a white field, that means you need to provide some explanation. Also, on the bottom of the accountability schedule, two questions asked. Number one, describe district's program that are designed to enable students in special populations and students from different races, ethnicities, and genders to meet Perkins performance targets. You need a narrative for that. And secondly, describe the process that will be used to evaluate and continuously improve the district's performance. Now I'm going to turn it over to Christy Mazzell James, and she will be providing information for you on how to complete the application budget.
Hi, as Amy said, I am Christy Mazzell James. I'm a grant negotiator at TEA, and I will be discussing how to complete the Perkins 5 grant application budget. I'll also share some excellent and accessible TEA grant resources. The first budget schedule you'll come to is the BS 6001 Program Budget Summary. The BS 6001 Program Budget Summary is the schedule on which you will distribute the entitlement amount among the categories of cost, which are called class object codes. The class object codes are here. They include payroll cost, professional and contracted services, supplies and materials, other operating cost, debt services, capital outlay, and if applicable, you can also enter indirect cost. Now, going back to part one, available funding. The total funds available will auto-populate on this line, so that will be your entitlement amount. That is what you have to work with. Then part two, as I said, this is where you would enter class object code totals and indirect cost, and you would enter those over here. When no funds are budgeted, leave the field blank. Do not enter a zero. Now we'll go to the bottom part of part two, and that's part 2B, breakout of direct admin cost. Direct costs are broken out into program cost and direct admin cost. Authorizing statute limits the amount of funds that may be budgeted to administer the program, including direct admin cost and indirect cost, to no more than 5% of the total grant awarded for any fiscal year. Please remember that administrative costs include both direct admin cost and indirect cost. There again, please remember not to enter a zero when you don't have funds to allocate there. Leave the cell blank. Now we'll look at the supporting budget schedules, the schedules for each of the class object codes. First of which is the BS 6101 payroll cost. First, you'll notice Part 1, total payroll cost. The total payroll cost line, this line, will auto-populate with the amount entered on the budget summary BS 6001. Next, you'll notice number and type of positions. Section A is for administrative support and clerical staff. Here, in this field, you will enter the number of admin support positions or clerical staff positions being charged to the grant. You'll need to use whole numbers, regardless of whether the positions are full-time or part-time. For example, if you have one staff position that's full-time and a second staff position that's part-time, you'll enter the number 2 in this field. Please remember, do not enter a dollar amount. This is for number of positions only. Then there are sections B and C for LEA positions, where you will check boxes for positions being charged to the grant. And then there's Part 3 for other types of cost, substitute cost, extra duty cost, and benefits. Now we'll move to the next budget schedule. Budget Schedule 6201, Professional and Contracted Services. The total professional and contracted services cost line will auto-populate here with the class object code amount from Budget Schedule 6001, the budget summary. Now, looking at this schedule, line 1 is rental or lease of buildings, space in buildings, or land. This line 1 is for long-term rentals, like, for example, long-term office space or use. The next line is for professional and consulting services that would need specific approval. Then the second from the bottom line in Part 1 is remaining 6,200 costs that do not require specific approval. There are many things that can be budgeted on this line, one of which is renting temporary space for trainings or meetings. So temporary space would be budgeted on this line, whereas long-term rentals would be budgeted on this line. For more information about correctly budgeting line items, see the Budgeting Cost Guidance Handbook, one of my favorite books. Negotiators use that book a lot, and I highly recommend it for getting your applications correct. Moving to the next slide. Isn't it strange what excites different people? The BS 6301, Supplies and Materials. There is no BS 6301 support schedule on the Perkins application. Supplies and materials do not require specific approval. Simply budget the amount in the budget summary. The next schedule you would come to is the BS 6401, other operating cost. First, you'll notice that the bottom line, which is total other operating cost, will be auto-populated from the BS 6001, the budget summary. And looking at the schedule, line 1 is for out-of-state travel for employees. The LEA must keep documentation of this locally. Line 2, travel for students to conferences. Pre-authorization is required in writing, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Line 3, educational field trips. LEA must keep documentation locally. Then lines 4 through 7 are unallowable for this grant. Then if you have in-state travel for employees, that can be budgeted on this second from bottom line, remaining 6,400 costs that do not require specific approval. Now, for this pre-authorization that is required in writing, you can go to a page on the TEA website entitled Forms for Prior Approval, Disclosure, and Justification. That's where you get your form for travel for students to conferences. And when I go over resources, I will show you exactly where you can access that page. Next schedule is the BS 6501 debt services. This is a newly designed web page schedule for us. Subscription-based information technology arrangements, SBITAs, with terms greater than 12 months can be budgeted on the BS 6501 debt services schedule. SBITAs are an allowable cost in the Perkins 5. However, capital lease liability cost, which would be entered on lines 3 and 4 here, are not allowable. Those lines will be grayed out. The instructions for the schedule can be accessed via the instructions button. And as Amy mentioned, there's an instructions button on every schedule of the grant. I highly recommend that if you are budgeting debt services cost, you should review the instructions that are found at the instructions button. Continuing with the BS 6501 debt services. Part 1, subscription-based information technology arrangement. Part 1, lines 1 and 2 is where you will enter SBITA principal and interest costs that will be incurred during the grant period. Whereas Part 2, description of SBITA, you will enter the total principal cost reflected on the contract for all years, the life of the contract, excluding interest. Also in this section, you will enter the beginning and ending dates of the contract. So I just want to mention that the total debt service cost on this line is the amount, if you have entered an amount on the budget summary for debt services, this is where that amount will appear, and then you would allocate the amounts between the principal and the interest there. Whereas the amount in Part 2, this amount is the total cost of the contract for all years of the contract. And please be aware that the amount that you enter in this field does not affect the budget. That's what I was trying to think of. So this amount does not affect the budget. In fact, none of the information in this field affects the budget. This is for information purposes only. Please be aware that this amount will be smaller than this amount and that they won't be equal. Moving on to the next budget schedule 6601, capital outlay. First off, what is capital outlay? Capital outlay includes equipment and capital assets. Equipment is defined as tangible personal property, including information technology systems, having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost that equals or exceeds the lesser of the capitalization level established by the district, or $5,000. That's a mouthful, but if you need to review it, we will have the slides posted. It is important that you refer to the program guidelines to find out if certain costs are allowable or unallowable under the Perkins 5. And more information about capital outlay can also be found in my favorite book, the Budgeting Cost Guidance Handbook, and the instructions button on the BS 6601 schedule. Now looking at an actual BS 6601 capital outlay schedule, the total outlay cost line, which is here, the amount will be from the BS 6001 budget summary. That amount will be auto-populated here. And please remember that all capital outlay requires specific approval. Looking at the part 1, line 1 is for library books and media capitalized and controlled by the library. Line 2 is for capital expenditures for additions, improvements, or modifications to capital assets which materially increase their value for useful life. But these are not ordinary repairs and maintenance. Line 3 is for furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software cost, and that you would itemize the actual items in part 2 of the schedule. When you itemize furniture, equipment, vehicles, or software on the generic description line, please, yes, a generic description, do not use brand names, do not identify vendors. For example, in line 3, this is a good example. It says medical laser for veterinarians. No brand names and no vendors identified. Perfect. The grayed out fields need not be completed, and in fact can't be completed. And then there's the add item button at the bottom if you need additional rows. Next, we'll look at the budget schedule 6020, required uses of funds. The Perkins grant requires that funds be used for the purposes listed in Part 2A on this schedule. So here is 2A. Here are the required uses of funds. Use this schedule, the BS 6020, to show how you will apportion funds among programs that fulfill the required uses. Now, when you open this schedule, part 1, first you'll see that that these class object codes will auto-populate from the amounts that are entered on the BS 6001, the budget summary, and then your entitlement. Your entitlement amount will be here. Now we're going to look at part 2 a little closer. Part 2 consists of A, which is required uses of Perkins funds, and B, which is uses of state and local funds. Funds must be budgeted in all 6 rows, all of these 6 rows, which are uses of funds, of Part 2A or Part 2B to meet funding requirements. If funds are not budgeted for all the required uses of funds in Part 2A, they must be addressed in Part 2B, uses of state and local funds. So when you complete this schedule, you'll need to budget funds for each use, each line. And then if you're unable to budget funds on any of the lines, for example, if you are unable to budget funds for provide professional development, then you would go down to the state and local funds section, find provide professional development, and enter funds in one of those class object codes. After you have saved the BS 6020, you will be taken back to the table of contents page for this grant. Here are all the schedules that you have completed, and you will know that you've completed them properly because the status will say complete for each of those schedules. Then the grantee official can click the certify and submit button. Now, if any of these schedules say incomplete, the certify and submit button will not appear for the grantee official. So that's one of the questions that we get pretty frequently. Please, if the grantee official can't find or the certified submit button is grayed out, check the status of the schedules. Once the grantee official clicks the certify and submit button, that will take the grantee official to this schedule, the GS 2000 certify and submit schedule. This is where the authorized official enters contact information and then simply click on certify and submit. The submitter information section is auto-populated from the system. So I know that when I submit things online, sometimes I feel very unsure. Did it really submit? Have I done this correctly or not? The way that you can verify that your application was properly submitted, you can go to your district's eGrants account page, click on the grants button, and in the drop down, choose submitted. And then you should find the Perkins listed in that list of submitted grants. And if you don't, return to the Perkins draft and try and figure out what's going on and contact your grant negotiator if you need assistance. Now I want to talk about some excellent grant resources that TEA has. This is the Grants Administration web page. It has a wealth of grant information and links to where you can get grant information. To get to this page, you simply go to TEA's homepage, find the Finance and Grants button, click on that, and from the drop-down menu, click on Grants Administration. That will take you to this page. In the menu, look at all the things that is available. Applying for a grant. If you're new to applying for a grant, this is perfect for you. Amending an application, that can be tricky sometimes. This might be helpful. Grant resources is a whole new world, and it takes you to another page. I've listed a few of the things that you can find on the grant resources page. There's my favorite handbook, the Budgeting Cost Guidance Handbook. When to amend the application, important dates for 24-25, the training videos that Amy mentioned, how to add, edit, or remove contacts in eGrants, how to request access to eGrants, and then the training slides from today and from the training slides and the videos from today for the Perkins, as well as the ESSA and SPED, will be posted on this important page, Grant Resources. So you really need to know how to get there if you need further help and information about these big grants. The FAQs. The FAQs are a very helpful document. You can find all sorts of it's a searchable document, and you can find all sorts of great information on that document. And then further along in this menu, you see there's a link to entitlements, and then there's a link to that page that I mentioned when I was discussing the BS 6401 other operating costs. This is the link to forms for prior approval, disclosures, and justification. So please familiarize yourself with this part of TEA's website. It can be so useful when you're trying to apply for your grants. And still, there's one more very useful bit of information that can be found on the Grants Administration page, and it would be down at the bottom of this list of menus. You can click on Division Contacts. So here we have all of the names of the grant negotiators, our regions, our email addresses, and our phone numbers. And then at the bottom, we have expenditure reporting contacts, the fiscal coordinators' names, their emails, and their phone numbers. So this is a good page to bookmark. Just so it's handy. Please note that negotiators and their assigned regions are subject to change. When necessary, a negotiator may direct you to the appropriate contact. So yes, we change regions from time to time, and our negotiation staff changes from time to time. So yes, you may get redirected, but we'll get you where you want to go, because we really want to help you be successful at applying for these grants. And now we come to questions and feedback, and I will turn this back over to Amy. Thank you.
And I'm back. Hope you enjoyed Christy's presentation. She did a great job. I'm going to see what's in the Q&A list. How long do you have to keep the documentation for field trips? That is an excellent question. I'm going to say that I don't actually know offhand. Do you know, Christy?
Well, I would think at least for the period of the grant, for the grant period.
At least for the grant period. However long you need to hold on to the application would be consistent to how long you need to hold on to the documentation, since those are connected documents. If you are running an SSA and pay for professional development for them, would that be number 6? Would that be number 6? I'm thinking you're saying line 6 on the schedule. And offhand, I cannot answer that without looking. So let me go back to that slide. If it's line 6,
If you paying for SSAs is on the 6,001 budget summary, I think.
professional development. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't have an immediate answer. Let me go to the next question and come back to that one. If you'll stay at the end, I will find an answer for you. How long does the CLNA review and approval take? That is probably not something I can give you a definite, finite answer to. It probably depends on how many reviewers there are and how many reviews each one has to do. It will certainly happen before your grant is funded. Oh, Tasha's typing the answer. She's got it. Do long-term curriculum contracts such as ICEV count for Sabitas, or is that computer hardware subscriptions only? Oh, that's a real good question. I would consult with your district business office because not every district does this the same way. Travel for non-employee is number 6. I guess they're saying line 6. I don't think we have any. Oh, I see we have 5 open questions. I'm going to go ahead to the next slide so that you can provide feedback. And then we'll see if these questions can be addressed before we're done. Okay, we'll keep this slide up so that everyone can scan the QR code and provide feedback for us. Will the Q&A be shared to distribution as well? I'm going to assume everyone got the slides. link to the slides. And please know that the presentation will be posted. Questions that can't be answered right now, we will have a follow-up of some kind. I believe we've captured everyone's email. And if it's information that needs to go to everyone, we'll ensure that we have a way to get that to you. Okay, it looks like my team did a pretty good job of answering most of the questions during the presentation. Everyone got access to the slides, and we'll stick around till 2:30. I see the question, when will the recording be available? I'm going to say hopefully within 10 days to 2 weeks. And the last question, when does the CLNA need to be done by? That I do know, June 28th. It was extended to June 28th. It was originally June 12th, but not everyone had a chance to submit it. So going to June 28th. That last question seems like a program question. And when you get a copy, if you have a copy of the presentation, the different program contacts are listed in the program area. The question from Derek Villanueva, are there differences that Perkins SSA members and LEA have to fill out for Perkins? The fiscal agent of the shared service arrangement fills out the whole application, and shared service arrangement members only have to fill out their part of it, which includes the accountability section and any questions that the fiscal agent asks of you. Thank you again for taking the time to come to this presentation today. We appreciate your time. We hope you received all the helpful information that you needed, and you know how to find us if you need more help and support. We look forward to working with you this year on your Perkins application. And again, I thank you for your time.